Good morning to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack here. Friday now, the 26th of September, 2025. Good to have you along with me, everybody. Today I want to talk to you about what I think are going to be some pretty major impacts coming from eventual Imelda here in the western Atlantic for the southeastern United States. And it's not what you think. I believe that people get way too focused on what category is it going to be, and they base all of their decisions on the word hurricane and then what category it may or may not be, and we forget, how quickly we forget that there are other impacts that can be absolutely substantial. And I want to make sure I hammer that point home as hard as I can today, because we've got the weekend coming up. A lot of people are now going to get scattered about with all kinds of fun activities, whatever that might be, and we're not going to be thinking about this as much. So I want to leave you, especially in the Carolinas, with something to think about, and that is basically these big-time impacts that I believe are going to be coming one way or another. So we're going to talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about Humberto and what it may or may not bring for our friends in Bermuda, and it too is going to have indirect impacts for us along parts of the eastern seaboard as well. So let's get started. My usual beginning point, National Hurricane Center homepage. There's Humberto, a hurricane now well on its way to becoming quite a powerful hurricane over the Atlantic, and we'll look at this in more detail in a moment. Then we've got Invest Area 94L. Eventually this is going to become, it does look like, tropical storm and probably eventually Hurricane Imelda. And it looks like maybe a South Carolina landfall, although that's not a guarantee. But that's where the center comes ashore, and we know that these things are not just little centers or dots. All the usual caveats apply, all right? All right, so satellite imagery this morning, the animation here courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. Look at Humberto right there. Boy, when you see that tail like that feeding in, you know this thing is really getting ready to ramp up. This will make a solid Category 4 out of itself, maybe stronger than that. We shall see. And just for reference, there is Bermuda. The official forecast does take this around Bermuda, something like that, and hopefully that will hold. But I think Bermuda could expect at least some peripheral impacts. We'll talk about that more, too, as we progress. But here is the fledgling Imelda to be. We'll call it 94L as the official invest number, trying to get itself away from these islands down here. Big old chunks of land impeding the inflow at the surface. The mid-levels also disrupted because some of these mountains down here are pretty big, and that also is creating problems for the people who live down here in the way of flash flooding and very heavy rain over that high terrain. Probably some very bad flooding going on. So once this clears these land masses, it does look like 94L will start to strengthen in the vicinity of the Bahamas, and then it's going to be a really big problem up here, I do believe, for the Carolinas. And here's a big clue as to part of this problem. Look at all this moisture streaming from southwest to northeast already, while not the exact same intensity already as we saw basically a year ago with Helene and what we call a predecessor rain event, a PRE. That area, this trough that's coming through this cold front, will squeeze out some moisture, and we're going to get some heavy rain and just general, 1, 2, 3, 4 inches of rain across some areas of the southeast ahead of what's coming in with Imelda to be. And that is going to set up saturated soils in front of what could be very excessive rainfall, depending on how slowly what will be Imelda. This is why once they get a name, it's just a lot easier, right? I think we could have a really big flood problem is what I'm driving at here. I really do. I was talking about this exact same thing a year ago, for western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, and here we go again in a similar geographic area, the Carolinas, once again. And we just can't ignore this. And I'm going to show you something at the very end that'll hopefully drive this point home, because again, we forget so quick, we get so focused, and I understand the word hurricane is just so attention-getting, and when someone says Category 3, Category 4, everybody goes crazy, right? I understand, but just mere rainfall, too much of it, can cause a lot of problems, a lot of misery, and of course, it can take lives, all right? So we have to focus on the totality of everything, not just whether or not this becomes that H word and then what category it may or may not become after that. Closing in on 94L, again, it is tangled up around these islands down here, mainly Hispaniola, and that's really been disrupting its ability to get organized. But once it clears those hurdles, literal hurdles, it should be off to the races that this will start to organize pretty quickly. Not the best environment overall, but certainly not too inhibitive. Water temperatures, and this is remarkable. I was looking at this just days ago, right? Remember the Northeast Gulf, just as an example, was cooler than average, and now all of a sudden, boom, it's back up to substantially above average. And that just goes to show you these shelf waters in here can react very quickly to the flow of wind. But notice, talking about totality, the totality of our rectangle in here, all that this encompasses, the latitude, the longitude area, I haven't calculated the square miles on it or anything, but just about every pixel out here on this entire map extent shows above normal water temperatures. Just a little speck right there of right where they should be, right in the middle. So 0 is neutral, and then this doesn't count because it's way south, right? Everything else above normal. And that is really telling because there's a lot of energy for our system to work with. And, of course, Humberto, the waters around Bermuda, actually very warm, 2 to 3, almost 3 degrees Celsius warmer than the long-term 30-year average. This is a problem, and it is not, again, I want to make this clear, not necessarily, oh, Imelda could become this very powerful hurricane. No, that's not what I'm saying. I look at this and I think, yes, there's energy, but I also think of it as a tremendous amount of latent heat and moisture that is in the atmosphere above that warm water, ready to go and get wrung out big time. We have seen it over and over again, at least the last 10 years or so, and certainly before that. We know we've had flooding. Even before I was born, we had big-time flooding events. But in recent years, really big historic flooding events, one after the other. And we just had one last year with Helene. And while I don't see anything setting up that catastrophic, you just never know, especially when I show you some of the scenarios that could be taking place here with what would eventually be Imelda. All right? So actual water temperatures. So these are your departures, what we call anomalies, right? The departures from some kind of a base state. That's what an anomaly is. So these are your actual water temperatures in degrees Celsius. This is your 30 degrees Celsius isotherm. That's line of equal temperature. Very warm, mid-80s, almost upper 80s. This is 29 C. There's the Gulf Stream right in here. So yeah, Imelda to be, we'll call it that. That sounds, I don't know, a little bit more attention getting than 94L. And at this point, yes, I do need your attention because I think this is going to have some serious implications for major impacts down the road. Very warm water temps, not only in the anomaly department, but also in reality. Moving the extent up north a little bit. This is interesting too. Just a few days ago, the 26 Celsius line was farther to the south and west because we've had such a warm pattern as of late. Water temperatures now back up above that 26 Celsius, or right around 80, all the way up to Charleston and vicinity. A little bit shy of that, about 25 Celsius or 78, 79 Fahrenheit. Near Myrtle Beach, the beaches of Brunswick County, and off of Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach, etc. But we've had a very warm stretch here. I remember, we were out, my wife and I, enjoying some soccer at the high school the last few days, and man, it was really toasty. That muggy is like 77 degrees last night here. Late September feels a lot like summer. And so all of that humidity, all that moisture is telling me something bad is coming. And it's not always just the wind and the surge and that all-important number, that category. The numbers I want you to think about could very much be rain once this comes inland. First, it's a coastal problem. Then we have big-time problems inland. All right, let's look at the dashboard over here from the Tropical Tidbit site. I got some friends in Bermuda, and look, we do have Humberto out here. The good news, the official forecast track does keep Humberto away from Bermuda by a good stretch. So that's great. One thing about this hurricane, though, it will send out swells towards Bermuda as well, and the north shore of these islands, and that will create the threat of rip currents, and that's going to create more flooding at the times of high tide in your vulnerable areas. So yes, there will be impacts from Humberto. Looking at the spaghetti model, I love that term, right? It's just perfect, isn't it? There's Bermuda. So all my friends over there, don't worry too much about it. Yes, this could change, but this is more cut and dry. Look at how tight that envelope is, if you will. The guidance envelope, pretty tightly clustered, and you want to see that. You really do. It's not all divergent with weird stuff going on. Some of the hurricane models, this is your halves, these newer models, hurricane specific, those are a little bit of an outlier. But look, they're more to the north and west, so that's even better for Bermuda. This could edge closer, but that's going to have to edge closer a lot to bring direct hurricane conditions to Bermuda. It's not impossible, but within 5 days, I highly doubt that we're going to see a track error that big. Now let's move on to 94L. This is really interesting. Again, it's a mess. It's tangled up around the islands. We're going to have to just keep waiting for this to get out over the open water and start to do something, and then we can figure out the intensity later. The forecast track, though, is what I find very important and the most important to focus on right now. And most of the guidance bringing this generally into the low country of South Carolina, some of the guidance bringing it up more towards southeast North Carolina. And it's interesting because one of the consensus models, the HCCA up here, does bring it up towards the border of North Carolina, South Carolina. Not quite inland where you could stop it south of the border. That's I-95, but hardy har. So we'll see. The consensus TVCN is way over here. That's another consensus model. So even some of the two consensus models kind of split there. And you notice this difference in what we've got with Imelda to be versus Humberto. This is not tightly clustered. This is a more loose system of guidance for us, which tells us that there is more uncertainty. But by and large, it looks like South Carolina, maybe Georgia. That's a rare, you don't talk about Georgia much with these landfalls, right? Not often. Usually they curve around like this, and Georgia at some point is, threatened. But this is different. This could be coming in perpendicular, and that could present some problems with surge along the coast down here, very vulnerable. But once this gets inland, that's where I'm really starting to worry about some big-time impacts. And again, focusing on social media just a little bit here. Different people are on top of this. 31,000 followers. Yep. And I appreciate you following me there, Florida Tropics. Always on top of this stuff. There are some folks that are really good at regularly posting stuff, and hey, it makes it easy for me to just show it to you. So here's the Euro. we could go over models again for an hour, but it's just not helpful quite yet because we don't have a center yet. But anyway, the 6Z Euro means that it was initialized at 6 Zulu time, or 2 a.m. Eastern. Landfall up here just north of Charleston. Maybe a hurricane according to the model guidance, but don't focus on that. Focus on how big this is, the impacts that it'll have for South Carolina, North Carolina, and then you see Humberto way over here, definitely an intense hurricane in the guidance. But this is what I wanted to show you. The rainfall could be really problematic. This is the ECMWF-based total quantitative precipitation. So this is kind of like an ensemble, right? This is like worst case scenario kind of deal. 6 inches for Columbia, 9+ for Florence, 8+ for Myrtle, 9 for Fayetteville. Cape Fear River Basin would be threatened with some flooding with that kind of rain. We need to pay attention to this more and more as we get through the next few days. This could shift more south. If the track is more north, it could be more north into more North Carolina. But the bottom line, we really do very quickly, as a country, as a society, forget that rainfall from especially tropical cyclones is as much of a major impact as storm surge. We're doing so much better against the effects of wind that only individuals living in really substandard housing have to worry about wind problems, and certainly people that live near big trees that could fall. Not downplaying wind to where it's not a problem, because it certainly still can be, but rainfall, freshwater flooding, people driving through it. We've seen it in big cities like Houston. Again, I keep reminding you of Helene last year, and it might seem so far away, even if you're along the coastal plain of the Carolinas, you heard about it, it was in your state, whatever, but it was over there. It was in the western part of the state. Don't forget Matthew 2016, the big sort of semi-related to Joaquin flood of 2015 in South Carolina. All that's gone now. The memories are still there, but we don't think about it on a daily basis. And I'm starting to see these big rainfall totals popping up days out. I'm saying to myself, oh man, this could be a big problem. We're going to have to watch this closely. Other guidance showing into the Carolinas. I mean, look at that. 9 up in Danville, Virginia, 5 in Roanoke. Yes, we're going to have to watch this very, very closely. Just to put another point on it, this is from the Department of Commerce, NOAA, Weather Service, INSEP, Weather Prediction Center, you name it. And again, this is like their quantitative precipitation forecast for the next week. All of the Carolinas here painted in some pretty high numbers, at least 5 inches. And that's a lot of rain, and it could be more than that. So that is the big story here that I think is going to end up, once again, being the legacy of Imelda to be. And just to remind you of what it can do, this is some video that I took, 360 video. This past January, Swannanoa River, this is drone, I put the 360 cam on the drone. I mean, look, this is what it does. Just to remind you, I'm serious. This, oh, you're hyping it up. You dadgum right I am, because that's what Asheville looked like in January of this year. How horrific. And all that rainfall, we have to respect the power of water. I mean, my goodness, it made the Grand Canyon. You don't think it can impact you? Of course it can. So we have to think about this not just from the perspective of whether or not it's going to be a hurricane and the category and all that stuff. Really, really, really look at this on the bigger picture scale. All right? So I'll stay on top of it. Got a big family weekend in interior North Carolina. Of course, got a big family, so there's always stuff happening. But I will be on top of this. I'll have an update tomorrow morning, mid-morning or so. And then we're going to be probably working out in the field starting Sunday and into Monday, doing lots of hits with Fox Weather coming up as well. And I'll stay on top of this, keeping you informed as best I can. All right? Take it seriously, though, especially that rainfall threat. I don't want to get caught by surprise, any of us, like we were last year. Even all that warning we had, what a loss. It really was. It still hurts a lot of people even to this day, and it will for many years to come, honestly. All right, that is it from me. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. As always, thanks for tuning in. I'm Mark Sudduth. I'll talk to you many times over the weekend.